All right, I think we're live here. Great. This week, we're doing something a little different to bring Ben on, our design and engineering lead that is helping us with all our cool projects. So, I thought it'd be fun to just go back and forth with you, Ben. Great to have you on and be able to talk through some of what we've just built here on Radar.
Heck yeah. Yeah. This has definitely been one of the more fun projects. We've definitely done a lot of back and forth building out this project here. So, um, I guess I can just talk a little bit about it.
Let's just jump in and let's start talking about it. I think the fun thing about this is that we did this we started as an experiment. Actually, it was sort of a Friday. Actually, it's 2 weeks today, right? Where we actually were browsing
Yes.
around, looking, got some inspiration, and was like, oh, hey, maybe we can figure out how to create and surface news for product and designers. Very niche, but I mean, there's a big audience there. But we thought, okay, how do we pick a topic area that's interesting to start aggregating news articles? And I think the first thing we thought about was, okay, how do you get to the sources of information? Like, what is the news? And I think that's where you started. You just were like, "Hey, can I go grab this stuff?" So what did you use there? Because we were doing this kind of live. You went to Claude and started to figure this out, or
Yeah, exactly. Basically, I took the idea that we started kind of conglomerating and building up and just started talking to Claude to see what we could figure out to do. And, some of this, there's a lot of context in the sense that on an engineering front, I know how to pull in, that you can just pull in links in a certain way. But after talking through it with Claude, we figured out that hey, you can actually point this robot or our system to go and pull links out of RSS feeds just because it's like the cheaper and easier way to actually pull out a bunch of links. So um yeah, I think that's how it started. And then I know that we talk a lot about loops and doing things in more like a continuous way. And so we kind of borrowed that sort of thinking and turned it into
yeah.
like a living system.
I mean, it's only been recent that we started talking like this. It's the new
Yeah.
kind of AI hotness of like, some people have been doing this a while, but I mean, ultimately, what we're trying to do here is figure out specifically how to um, not continue to prompt, right? To figure out how do we get new, interesting results back in a way that is upfront thinking that then comes back with more feedback. And this is really across all the work that we're trying to do is figure this out. But in this particular case, it seemed like a very concrete way to maybe experiment around this to see how do you create loops that are continuously going and figure out how to put ourselves into the middle of that without also disrupting the workflow. So it's some combination of automation but also editing. So I think that's the first part that was most interesting is seeing a feed go up right away where you're able to collect. I think you had it up in like a few hours now.
Yeah, I had the first working prototype up pretty quickly. And of
Yeah.
course, me being an engineer, I'm like, hey, Brian, let's do a design pass and actually make this thing look good. So yeah,
Yeah. I mean,
it's really amazing how you can have AI kind of spin something up as just like this idea pretty dang quickly. So yeah.
yeah, I mean, I think this is a thing where most designers and whatnot are probably thinking like, AI takes the fun out of it, prompting and whatnot. But what I think we did here is we went straight back into the mode of like, okay, well, what can we do with this? In some ways, again, this is like n- not always what we want and advise, but we just went into the technology and started using that as our exciting driver to figure out how can we use these pieces to um, surface news in a way that might be interesting. So we purposely went to this pixelated idea of being able to. We've talked about this. We both like, the I don't
We're
know
nerds.
yeah, nerds, the 2-bit video hand games and stuff like that from yesteryear. And I had talked a little bit with you about. I had a Game Boy way back in, I think, the late 80s when it was coming out in Japan, and because we had a foreign exchange student and they had brought as a gift this device, Um, the kid's dad, I think, had like, 100 Kentucky Fried Chickens or something like that. So he was well to do. And I saw this thing, and it was just the coolest thing because all the handheld games that I had worked on or played, sorry, worked on them and, the build mode here, they were all like, background light. Uh, I didn't even know what you call it. It's like they weren't even LEDs at the time. They're like nodes or where they'd light up and stuff like that. So telecom football and stuff like that. And those were awesome. But this thing like just totally blew my mind as this little portable like video game thing that you could play. This was back in the 80s. And I think it always just stuck in my head. It was just such a fascinating thing. And so looking at this, we said, oh, why not go a little more retro? All the kids are into the retro tools and have fun with it. So that's what you see here. I think that, the fun part of this is when we started doing this, many designers will probably relate to this type of thing where it's like it's just a mess. It's just a mess of things that don't really make any sense, and you're sort of like, "What is this thing? And what are we trying to surface with it?" Like it was full on, just go straight to design before you actually start thinking about too much of the work at hand, and just see if there's some style or something we can latch onto that would help you build out more of the site. And all of this thing we were able to start finding patterns that we thought were interesting. And you can kind of see our admin site you know was fairly boring, and I was trying to get us to clean it up. But I think the interesting part here is, you kind of one of the things that I've tried to figure out is how do you get rid of the mess when people are working on it. So, been playing around with that. But we went in and then started doing some fun stuff with the layouts. But I think the more interesting part here, before ever looking back at that, is you know how does this feed work, right? Because you've got these sources of content that are coming in from lots of different directions. What is it that you're actually doing here? Because it's pulling in the feed, but then it's in the back end, we're basically organizing the content and then making some decisions around which ones are tied together and how could they pull together into a unified story.
Yeah, so just a little bit on the engineering front, as we can kind of see from a little bit of this admin view, we basically pull in tons of links from a bunch of different sites that we've gone through and curated and defined. So Brian and I, we went through together and we created like a list of, oh, this site is interesting. We can might be able to ref or pull out some links that could be like relative to or even curated, for product
Yeah.
and
And
designers.
and this is all still using old technology, RSS, right? It's
Yep.
it's using feeds that have been around for a while, but now you can repurpose them in different ways.
100%. Yeah, it just makes it, 10 times 10 times easier to pull in content when you're going through an RSS feed. Because then you can it's just, very strict, very straightforward traffic content that's pretty similar across pretty much all of the sites. So if you have an RSS feed, right, it's just the old school way to kind of display content in more of a technical way.
Right.
Um, yeah, and then just to go a little bit more into the technology here, basically we take in all the links, we index them so that when we go and we pull from a site again, we don't forget, and repull in this exact same links that we've already done before. And at the same time, we'll actually have some not so smart models, the smaller models that'll actually go through and label the content, which is why we can see like the AI
Label.
understanding user needs tools, AI terminology, large language models, machine learning concepts. So there's all these tags that help us identify and curate the content to be more specific and relative to what we actually want. So that's kind of the interesting part with the link pulling in.
Right. And so like the what we're doing here though specifically is we are categorizing, summarizing, and then putting this into link format that would allow us to then consolidate these into a thematic idea, or is the thematic idea happening outside of the direct? content that's been produced here? Or are we
So actually
thematically creating?
outside of it, it's
Okay,
we kinda, like, label and categorize first, so I always like to look at everything in, like, tiny stages. So you first do the indexing and labeling, and then there's another step on top of that, which right now for us, it will run daily, and it'll actually go through and start categorizing and grouping the links together. And so there's a couple different phases here in order to get us to have these topics that are more, um, relative, and they're actually, the links are
right.
going to make sense within that topic.
So we get these links in here, and then we have then what we're calling headlines. We've created. Then those headlines then are ranked based on what is the ranking? How are we pulling that initial ranking? Because there's a number given to it initially, and then it's refined based on the arena, right?
Exactly. So we actually start with a normal flat line of 1500 score. So we give every new topic that comes in 1500. So it's like it's typically the middle ground across all of them. And then
1500 sounds like a good arcade number. Why
it,
not?
well, it's funny because in chess, you can go, I think, all the way down to 100, maybe even zero. I don't know anybody who's
Yeah,
got
and then
zero.
3000s is the highest, right?
Exactly.
Okay,
Yeah.
so you're literally taking a scoring of a chess.
Yeah, exactly. Like, unless you're Carlsen, you can go above 3,000.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah. We were talking about him today. He incredible. I've seen him play chess blindfolded against 6 people, like, as the
it's
boards, and he making his decisions and then moving from chessboard to chessboard. Just incredible stuff. The guy's got, like, a photogenic memory.
he's yeah. Is it photogenic or is it photographic?
Photogenic is being looking good for the photo. He's pretty good looking. He's a pretty good looking guy though too, right?
Yeah,
So
he's good looking dude. He's got the mustache,
yeah.
He's got the
So
mustache.
he's got yeah, mustaches. So yeah, he's got that going for him as well. So he's both smart and good looking guy. So tell
Um,
us, what are we doing with these numbers? So you've got numbers here.
yes, we have numbers, which we have one which is indicating like, hey, this is the top one on the list. And what we've started to notice over time as we introduce more topics over time, it starts the score is actually kind of going down. I think it'll probably not orient, but re-level out once we get like a new set of headlines to go in and start to select. So, but just going back to the numbers, right? This is number one, so it's at the top, sitting at right now 502. So it's the highest performing one that is currently set up. So the next step of this would probably be to generate the draft since it is the highest performing one based on I think we maybe just go into a little bit of the arena potentially to explain how these headlines are even getting to the top of the scoreboard. I think the concept's pretty basic. What do you think,
Yeah.
Brian?
Yeah.
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 that's-
Jump into it. So
So yeah, we have an arena that we have going on that basically gives you four different topics to select from. We've already gone through and rated all of our topics right now. So that's why you see like a full red bar up here. But what ends up happening is that we go through and we try to think of which story would I be the most interested in seeing. And so I go through and I look at each one of these. I'm like, okay, cool. This one looks like it's the most interesting out of the four. And so what happens here is that when you select one, its score will go up, and the rest of them, depending on what their score is at the moment of selection, will go down depending on more or less depending on one was selected. So it's just like it's going back to the chess idea of if you're a level 3000, a chess example, that and a level 1700 came in and beat the 3000 is going to jump down by like a huge significant number, and the one that was low is now also going to jump up. like by a significant number. They could flop, but most of the time there's like a
Yeah.
weighting, so you're not gonna just, completely
So
surpass.
basically, we're scoring these things, and it's an ongoing list of scoring, and then you've got an ordered list there that shows up in our headlines, right?
Yep, exactly.
And the headline component here now, and again, this is more of a human editing process right now.
Yeah.
Remains to be seen if more of this can be trained to figure this out. But you click into this, and now you're gonna generate a draft. Let's just do one because
Yeah.
it's kind of fun.
Yeah, let's just do this one. Let's go. So, we jump in and we get to see our links that are currently. I'm actually wondering, Brian, if we cut this out because this one actually isn't relevant. I'm like double date island.
All right. Time out, time out. Let's switch it. This is
Let's do a different one.
great stuff. Actually, this is like the hard part about any kind of development. It's still a work in process, but this editing process still allows us to figure out and learn. So
Yep.
the reality is that yeah, part of this is how do we navigate this type of stuff, and you learn through the doing part. So all right, well, let's pick a different one.
Yeah, let's try number two. This one looks pretty interesting. Sonnet 5 ships cheaper agents, and now the leaderboard decide who wins. Cool. So, yeah, it looks like if you look at all the links here that are basically producing this topic, they're all related to Sonnet 5 and how I wouldn't say, I think it's just, yeah, in the Sonnet 5 world. So we're going to
Yeah,
go ahead and we're like, okay, cool. These links look all good. Let's go ahead and just generate the draft here, which this takes a little bit of time. But for
yeah,
reference, maybe I can go into a little bit of the logic in the background of why this takes some time to generate a draft.
yeah,
It'd
yeah.
be
We can do
interesting.
that, and or we can kind of look at my screen and get a sense of like what this thing is going to produce. So ultimately, we've got a stylistic treatment that we've done based on that initial pixel art and being able to create a relevant image, headline, and then summary, and then it shows you topic, headline, subheads that get you into the meat of the article with links back into those articles. So our intent here is to create awareness of these authors in writing and get people excited about, um, these publications, the articles. We've just got 60 of them in here right now, and so we'll continue to refine those. I think having the RSS feed definitely helps with being able to share this content and then create awareness. But I think it's the goal here is to put us in a place where you've got something interesting to look at. We've got this kind of stylistic treatment here, pulls you in. You can read the article, and then you've got the resources of the links here to the other ones. We've also um, tried to put this into like what's the point of it, the deep cut of how it relates back maybe to your work, and three questions to your team. Kind of find that is an interesting um, sort of way to frame the article and get you thinking about it. I think questioning things and asking questions are always good. So that's why we've put the questions up there. So, all right, looks like you now have a generated article.
Yes. Yes, yes, yes. So yeah, look at that. I just love each and every one of these images that get get generated. Yeah, these are
So we've got this like cool thing that we've created and defined it, which creates this pixel art, and we've defined our color palette and whatnot, and it sets a mood, right? But part of our inspiration was the Twilight Zone sort of bizarro world. We're in this tech world. We're living somewhat in both worlds of one foot in the technology, one foot into just doing design and creative things and whatnot. And so we just leaned into it. So you get these kind of fun images that in some ways don't make sense, but they're homage to the older Twilight Zone type of feel, but then also the randomness sometimes that AI can get you. So I don't know. I find it fascinating. I look at these things and I'm always like wanting to stare at them and try and figure out. I don't know if it's the mood or what, but
what is this computer? Is this like an old school type of computer
it's
here?
it's like a laptop that meets a stack of computers. It's sort of like a terminal meets like an Apple II GS way back when with I don't know.
Almost
It's
like a
kind of
desktop
interesting.
that got flipped on its side, and then they just glued the, like, keyboard and laptop piece of it to the top of the desktop. Yeah, it's super interesting.
So in every image, there's some kind of unique thing we've put into it
Yeah.
on purpose. So it's not completely random, but
Yeah,
it
it's
does
actually
have.
yep. Actually, I'll let you talk through that one.
Yeah, no, no, no. It's fun, and I think the other thing that makes it interesting is the limited color palette. So
Yes.
it's enough of hots and colds with the colors to be able to create that tension, and it creates a lot of contrast in what's going on. So I think the other thing that's really interesting is the lo-fi part of it. The pixelation, it it's not so literal, right? There's like there's depth of field and whatnot, and so it sort of lets your brain kind of interpret it as you look at it, and it's not so literal. So I don't know. Maybe you have a different perspective on it,
Well, it's
but
probably a good thing too, because we know how AI likes to generate 6 fingers. I don't know if it still has that problem.
well,
But
now
with the
now that's
retro
cool. Now that's cool if you got six.
yeah, now it's like now it's not as big of a problem when you have this, like, retro vibe. But yeah, I absolutely love this. It's interesting too, because like you said with the color palette, my eyes will actually wander throughout the entire image because I'm actually looking at it and I'm interested in what what it's showing here. So,
Yeah. I think we lived with this for like a few days and we're like, is this bizarre? Is this like what is this? And I think we've kind of kept it going for a while and I think it's still interesting. So we've kind of left it and continued to play around with it some to vary the imagery, but yeah, I don't know. I think some of the ones I like the most are when the scene has depth. Like if you look at my screen right now,
yeah,
it's it's just like what is going on?
I
It's like
love this one so much.
it's it's reminiscent. It's like a rainy day, and it's like Willy Wonka and in like a market, like
I'm surprised it gets
in
that
a
reflection down too of it. It actually is
yeah.
reflecting really Wonka at the bottom there. It's kind of crazy.
It's definitely when you get to like the things like that where you get the red reflection with the green. It's just it looks pretty cool.
Yeah.
Um, Right, and then there's some more we're kind of experimenting with this because there's some themes and tropes that keep showing up, but, how about an alien green guy in the middle of your field working,
Is that
That's
a gold? What is that green floating thing? Is that like a
it's like a screen, it's like his head, right? It's awesome. It's like, his headspace, so, um,
Just one comment on
yeah,
I
some
think the technique of the image prompt. I think that might be a little interesting. Or
yeah,
we can keep
yeah.
through these if you want
Well,
to.
no, I
So
think there's this thing with, like, if you look at old painters and whatnot from like the Renaissance and stuff, they all had like their symbolisms and stuff they'd put back into all their pieces. And so you just have to kind of look at the paintings and try and find them. And, part of that was about establishing style and identity and, making it so that it was harder to rip off, just, and it put your mark on your painting. But it's kind of happening in these things where we've got windows a lot in chairs. Chairs are a theme, but the funny thing is like the chairs, I think it's because it's taken like business things of chairs and sitting, but it's like tried to make it something else. So it makes the chairs like the art, which is kind of fun. I think the other thing we do is the lighting. We make it more dramatic. But yeah, some of the stuff is just bizarre, but it's fun.
yeah.
Very cool. Well, I think the other part that's interesting is that we have links that are coming in on a continuous basis. So we've got basically a process there that's storing them, and then once the article has been published, now it's tagged, and then we can get back to it and you can link to it. On the homepage, though, what we've done is kind of building up towards things. And I think the fun part about this project is that we don't have it all figured out. Like we created a featured article, which is great. And so looking at this, it's like, oh, this is a nice headline. Does it need a subhead to balance it? Obviously, we're still gung ho on, the font and the things, but we could change our mind after a while of that. But we've also built new styles into this so that if you don't like that, there's a different way to read it. And this one is kind of interesting because we just make it all black and white. But I think the fun part about this is that we're navigating it and exploring as we go through the process. And just I think it makes it kind of fun. So what would we like to see, featured articles, the popular feeds, and trying to figure out, how do they show up and how do they disappear? How long do you want them up there for?
You
It's a
you know what I'd
fun
be
it's
curious
a fun
about?
experiment.
Yeah, you know what I'd be curious about is what are the themes people might like to see out of this?
Yeah, obviously, right? I mean, if we're honest, we know that the content is what drives it, and so part of
Yes.
this is getting to a place where it's like, can you get some news or information that's interesting that you wouldn't otherwise have access to? And, can we curate news that's fun and tied to your work, but also mix in enough fun elements to it that makes it enjoyable to come back to? So that sort of remains to be seen, but that's the idea that, it captures your attention and makes it easy to just dive in and get something of interest right away.
Yeah.
All right. Well, this is great. I'm excited. We'll have to kind of check back in 2 weeks and see how where it's at or what's happened. But I think the fun part about this is that it's sort of a choose your own adventure. We can figure out where we're going with it. We can experiment and learn from the technology. And the idea that we have it all planned, we don't. This is obviously a lab project and something that we wanted to put out there and share some of the working styles that Ben and I have developed. And yeah, I think it's fun. I mean, I think it's really invigorated me to keep jumping into this AI world with new, fresh set of eyes.
Yep, fully agree there. I'm super excited. Like I said, this on engineering front, there's a lot of really cool stuff that you can start to really learn about like how to navigate, these AI tools and what sort of almost living systems can you start to build out based on something like even small like this? Like I said, this is 2 weeks, and
Yeah,
each article is only really like 30 cents, to really produce. So
right.
cost wise, it's actually a lot lower cost than what it like this probably would have been like a month or two build in order to get it out for normal
Yeah.
engineering. So yeah,
Absolutely, and I think the fun part about this is because we can iterate, but it also makes it harder in some ways because it really comes down to the content and being able to create something that's interesting.
yep, high
So
quality.
I think that's the fun part is it refocuses us back onto that. So yeah, I guess we'll come back and we'll start looking at some of the metrics and what's happened and the data that we were collecting in this to figure out what works, what doesn't work. So hopefully we can share those learnings. So all right, awesome. Let's get back to it.